Today, I want to talk about something that I am so good at. I have definitely reached expert level in this particular skill. And based on my conversations with many of you, I know that many of you have this as well. It's called people pleasing. We're so good at it. Today, I'm going to break down why we people please, what it actually is, what the downsides or potential benefits of it are, and what to do about people pleasing. Stay tuned. Okay, so before I get into this, I want to introduce myself. My name is Deibert. I'm a performance coach for enterprise and strategic account executives. I help with mindset and productivity. And something that I see getting in the way of so many sellers is people pleasing. And you might be like, why? Why does that get in the way? How is it a problem? I'm so good at it. Maybe you're like me. Let me just quickly go to the background of why so many of us people please. A lot of us people please because of the childhood that we experienced. For me, there was a lot of chaos in my childhood, and this is true for a lot of people. And as kids, we are so good at surviving. Kids are so good at surviving. They have all these adaptations that they use and make to be able to survive. And so what's fascinating is that if you're a kid and you grow up in an environment that feels chaotic to you, maybe it doesn't even feel chaotic to other people around you, but to you, it feels chaotic, then you sometimes will decide that the reason it's chaos is because of you. Now, let me just play this out. This doesn't make any sense at all, right? Like, what if my parents are a disaster and it feels very chaotic because of them? Why would I blame myself for this? Well, if I'm in a situation where my caretakers aren't able to care for me in the way that I need, that feels very uncertain. But if I somehow place the blame on myself of it's my fault that they're acting this way because I didn't do my homework, or because I left my toys out, or I was too emotional, or I was too much, or I was not emotional enough, or whatever the reason may be, right? If we decide that the chaos we're experiencing is our fault somehow, then we gain control over it. Now, we're not this helpless kid anymore who just has to rely on their caretakers to become different people. Now we have some control over the situation. We can change ourselves. We can adapt ourselves. It's a survival mechanism that serves us as kids. And as we get into being grown-ups, it no longer serves us anymore. So we take this mechanism with us and we become people pleasers. I'm going to read the room. I'm going to understand how everyone around me is feeling. I'm going to understand your emotions. I'm going to absorb them. And I'm going to adjust myself based on how you're feeling. So many of my clients have experienced this, and they feel like when I describe being a chameleon, they're like, yep, that's exactly it. You might be a chameleon. You can be whoever the other person needs you to be in whatever role it is. And you can just change yourself and adapt yourself and be whoever they need you to be in order to be successful in that role. Now, let me be clear. There are so many benefits to this, definitely downsides, but there's so many benefits that it becomes this like this old security blanket that we have, that we've used, and we've gained a lot of success being this way, being adaptable and being able to adapt to what other people need. The problem is, as you get further into your career, these same mechanisms become the thing that burn you out. When you're being everything for everyone else and you're not taking care of yourself, it's just not sustainable. And you can sustain it to a certain point, and then it just the floor collapses and you no longer can do that anymore. I know personally, and I've had so many clients who've experienced this as well. So all those survival mechanisms were helpful at one point. It's really nice when you're thinking about past versions of you. What I used to do is I used to have so much disgust for these past versions of myself. I'd be like, oh, you're the worst. Why would you do that? Why would you behave that way? That's such a bad idea. And that is not helpful either, because those past versions of you were doing the best job that they could. They were doing the best that they could with what they had. And instead, you can be very grateful to them. You can be like, you know what? You did the best you could. And I'm so grateful to you. Got me here today. Because you had those survival mechanisms, I survived and I'm here today. And I'm now recognizing that this security blanket that I'm holding around is disgusting and stinky and smelly and dirty, and it's no longer serving me. That's the key. Is this behavior still serving you? The problem is when you try to get rid of that behavior, it feels for me, it feels like being an astronaut untethered in space. I don't even know where I am. If I don't have that thing to ground me of this is how I behave, this is how I do it, Like what? I don't even know. Like I have no other experience in other areas to know how to behave if I'm not people pleasing. So it can feel very unfamiliar. And I want to tell you, as you're changing your behaviors, whether it's people pleasing or imposter syndrome or whatever you're changing, it can feel incredibly disorienting. And that's normal. Changing any of these behaviors will feel so uncomfortable. And your brain is going to be like, oh, it's uncomfortable. This is wrong. And that's not true. It may be uncomfortable, and that may just be because it's unfamiliar. Just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just might mean that it's a new territory that you're walking into of not people pleasing. So let me tell you a story that happened this past weekend that explains why I'm so much thinking about this lately. I've been doing so much work to not people please anymore. I recognize that it's burned me out. It's not helping me, and it's genuinely not helping anybody else. I've had clients that I've worked with in the past who are like, I'm having a hard time building deep relationships. And it's interesting because the problem is they're not being themselves. They're trying to people please and be what they think the other person wants them to be. But the other person is experiencing like a facade version of them and doesn't totally trust them, and so isn't able to connect with them. Does this make sense? Like if you're trying to be what you think I want you to be, and then we have a conversation, I'm going to feel kind of like, I don't know, like I don't feel like I really know the real you. The best thing you can do for yourself and for everybody else involved is be yourself, state what you need, and ask for what it is that you need. Vouch for yourself, stand up for yourself. It genuinely can help everybody around you. I know it does not feel that way, but I promise it can help everybody. So this is a personal path that I've been on of trying to release my people pleasing, trying to set boundaries, trying to stand up for what I need, trying to ask for what I need. And it feels very hard. However, I feel like I've made tons of progress. I'm like very proud of myself in saying no to things and vouching for what I need and like asking for help. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I think I'm in a pretty good spot as far as people pleasing. Well, that all got kind of demolished this weekend. Maybe not demolished, but I had a rude awakening of like how much work I still have to do. I have this real big fear of being a burden. I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but I have a huge fear of being a burden. I do not want to ask anybody to do anything that would possibly make them upset or put them out in any way because I asked for what I need. It's so fascinating. There've been multiple experiences that I feel like the universe is placing into my lap to teach me what this is and what it isn't. It's so interesting because sometimes I'll feel like I'm really being a burden and the other person doesn't think I'm a burden at all. So this past weekend, we took my daughter to the ER. Thankfully, it wasn't life-threatening, but as part of it, they had to draw some blood. And so they needed to put in an IV. We were at this wonderful children's hospital, and they had this wonderful person come in and explain to her what was going to happen. She had this doll. She like explained the IV process. She had my daughter like feel different things. And she had this doll. She came in and explained the whole process. She let my daughter feel different parts of the materials that they were going to use and explain the whole thing to her. And she gave my daughter different options to make the process more comfortable. So she would say that we have this little buzzing device that we can put on your arm, and it will make it so that your brain doesn't register the pain as much. It'll feel the buzzing instead. And it was fascinating because this woman was so kind and so wonderful. And she walked in, and to me, which this is another piece, I'm always like, am I actually right? I think I understand these people, but maybe I don't even know how they're feeling. To me, she seemed exhausted. It was really busy that day. I'm sure she'd had tons of other cases that she'd been working on. And she just seemed like she was like running on fumes. That's how I read the room, which is another piece I'm asking myself, like, is that right? Is that actually how she was feeling? Maybe I was completely wrong. Maybe my judgments were off. So anyway, that's how I read it. She seemed exhausted. And when she was offering my daughter these different options for her IV and making it more comfortable, in my head, I was thinking like, no. We don't want to be a burden. You obviously need a break. You don't need to go out of your way to get all these extra options and go find these things and bring them back and like have them all ready for my daughter. That's what I was thinking. But thankfully, she wasn't asking me. She was asking my daughter. And thankfully, even more so, my daughter seemingly hasn't picked up these people-pleasing tendencies that I have. And so it was fascinating to me to watch the whole interaction and watch what was going on inside of my head. She would offer my daughter something like this little buzzing thing on their arm. And my daughter would say yes. And I was like, "Ooh, we shouldn't say yes. You don't want to be a burden, right?" And then she'd offer something else that could potentially help. And my daughter would say yes. And she'd offer something else. And I'm like, at this point, we've already said yes to too many things. Like, stop saying yes. Like, by all means, like, don't overwhelm this woman. This is too much. And so she'd offer something else. My daughter would say yes. And it was so fascinating me to just observe the whole thing. Because in my head, I'm like, you're being such a burden. This poor lady, she's exhausted. There's so many cases. They're so overwhelmed. It's like the whole ER is busy right now. And it was really interesting because in my head, I'm thinking she's being a burden. But in reality, this woman was asking my daughter if she wanted these options. She would never offer them unless she expected them to be able to accept it, right? She would never offer those extras. And it's so fascinating because it wasn't like my daughter was like, oh, and by the way, could you bring me a cherry pie? And by the way, like, she wasn't asking for anything above and beyond what she was being offered. And it's so fascinating to me. Like, if I go to the hair salon or whatever, and they're like, oh, do you want a glass of water? Like, no. I don't want water. Even if I actually want water, I'll be like, no, I'm fine. Don't bother. Like, don't go out of your way to take care of me. And it's just really fascinating to think about, like, is it a burden to say yes to something that somebody offers you? So anyway, this whole thing goes down. And I was really proud of my daughter for advocating for herself and saying what she wanted and saying yes to the things that she was being offered. And I was really glad that she hadn't soaked up my tendencies. And it really made me question myself of like, is it being a burden to say yes to things that are offered to you? So I think I have a little ways to go with people pleasing. I hope that this has explained to you a little bit about why you people please and the positive effects of it, but also the massive downsides to people pleasing. And I want to challenge you, just like I'm challenging myself, to try letting yourself be a little bit of a burden. Even if logically it isn't being a burden, but here's how I'm starting super small. You might laugh at this. It sounds ridiculous coming out of my mouth, but I know that it's going to be a heroic effort and I'm going to be really proud of myself when I do it. Here's my goal. I decided that for the next month, maybe even longer, we'll see how long it goes, till I feel comfortable, basically. When somebody offers me something that I want, I'm going to say yes. For those of you who are not people pleasers, you'll be like, this is the stupidest thing ever. For those of you who are people pleasers, I know you're going to be like, what? That sounds so hard. So everybody, we're going to live life on the wild side and we're going to try it out. We're just going to see what happens when we say yes to things that we're offered and things that we want. If you want to take a step beyond that, ask for what you want. People around you, I promise you, they would rather know what you want than not know what you want and have you be upset because you're not getting what you want, but they're not mind readers. That's what I've learned. They're not mind readers and they would rather that you just tell them what you want. They can then say yes or no if they want to do it or not. They get to decide. They get to be in charge of their own body and their own behaviors and decide if they're going to live up to that expectation or not. But you get to ask. You get to ask. You get to ask for help. You get to say what you need. You get to take a break when you need to. And you get to fill up your cup first before you go fill up other people's cups. Okay, you ready for the challenge? Say yes to things that you want that people offer you. Let me know how it goes. If we haven't connected on LinkedIn yet, I would love to connect with you. Find me over there. Just search for my name, Amber Deibert. And if you want more helpful tips in your inbox every single week, I have a really fun newsletter that people love. Go join it at mentalmastery.com/newsletter. And I'll see you next week.